Hey everyone, happy Monday. Hope you had a great weekend. And as always, there goes Pepper. Um, there are three things I wanted to talk about today. Two are just more on the entertainment side, and then the last is more on the interview yesterday with RFK Jr. and Dana Bash. But I wanted to start with the good stuff first. So last Thursday, I had the opportunity to go see Spider Man Brand New Day. Um, and it was solid. Like it was a solid movie. Um, I think if I'm looking at it from the perspective of um, like why the movie was good, um, I would say one, it's not a Marvel, it's not a Disney. I should say a Disney produced movie. It's Sony. Um, they split the revenue. But Sony is the company that produces the movie, and I'm at this point I'm pretty sure that Sony has figured out the formulaic approach to Spider-Man. What his How his core character is very important to the broader story. And also, like, you don't change anything. You make sure that he is the main focus, and you also make sure that he is a good person. Um, his entire thing is like not killing people. He's got this great power, but comes great responsibility. But at any rate, the movie was solid, and I wasn't expecting any less. Given the last Spider-Man movies that I've seen, or just in general, and people can say what they want about the Andrew Garfield movies. Um, the last one it did have a lot of characters and a lot of things going on, and it was a bit of a mess, but it was still a good movie. And I think that's what people like forget about. Like it was still a popcorn movie. Now you can go in and say like, oh, I would have done this differently. Or I would have done this differently. Like we didn't need to have so many characters and this, that, and the other. And like they could have done this with the plot. All that aside, people, including myself, enjoy going to see that movie. It had a lot of spectacle. It had a lot of visuals. It was great. Um, and also Mary Jane dies in the movie, which creates it would have created a very interesting third Spider-Man, which we got to see a little bit of that character in the last Spider-Man 2, um, Spider-Man 3, I guess, or whatever Spider-Man movie it was, with the Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire Spider-Man. We got to see kind of the repercussions of having Mary Jane die in Andrew Garfield's universe. But at any rate, all the movies have been good, and so I wasn't surprised. And I made the point a couple videos ago. There was all of this conjecture around the Odyssey and this, that, and the other, and Odyssey was like so good, and I said that I guarantee that Spider-Man will significantly outperform the Odyssey by a substantial amount when it comes out. Because for all these people saying like, "Oh, this movie is the greatest movie that's ever been made," and blah blah, no, there's a fundamental reason why the Odyssey had revenue numbers as high as it did. And I'm not going to sit here and say like, "Oh, the Odyssey is a bad movie," or whatever. I haven't seen it. I had no interest in seeing it. It's the first time. I had zero interest in seeing a Christopher Nolan movie, and I'm a Christopher Nolan fan. I would just say the casting decisions and the overall banter around the movie just kind of turned me off from it in general. I'll watch it when it comes out on streaming. But at any rate, like everybody was saying, like, "Oh, this movie is like doing so much. It's doing so much revenue." Blah blah. Well, there's a fundamental reason why the Odyssey had so much revenue. Nobody talks about how many people actually saw the movie, um, because not as many people saw the movie. Not even not even close to the number of people that saw Odyssey to see as to the number of the people that saw Spider-Man over the last 4 days. And this is because of one reason, and that's IMAX. Christopher Nolan has figured out that I can make a movie. I can make a movie in my vision that's going to go after a certain segment of the audience, but it's not going to go after a large audience. Um, so how do I make a lot of money, or how do I recoup the money, and how do I make sure the movie's successful? Well, I can shoot it in a format which has a ticket price that is nearly double the ticket price of a regular theater. And this is, in fact, why The Odyssey was so successful in its revenue numbers. Again, nobody's talking about how many people want to go see this movie because they don't really share those numbers. They just talk about the amount of revenue that the movie produces. Now, the interesting thing to note is in why Spider-Man is so important on a whole multiple levels is one, Spider-Man wasn't shown in any IMAX theaters. It was only shown in regular theaters. That means that the average ticket price was around $16 to $17 to go see this movie. The average ticket price for an IMAX showing is around $23 to $26. I've talked about this in um, another video. It's nearly double the price. And so for Spider-Man to do nearly $1 billion on opening weekend, this is global box office. It was like just shy. I think it was around $932 million last I checked. Just shy of $1 billion. On opening weekend in regular theaters says so much more about what audiences want than The Odyssey making $264 million globally on opening weekend. I mean, I don't. It's super annoying right now. Like, especially as someone who is a movie fan. And I'll put the caveat out there. I wasn't a comic book reader growing up. I read a few Dark Knight comics, but I'm not steeped in the lore or any particular story. I like going to the movies and I like seeing good movies. And if there's a good director that's making a movie I find interesting, I'm gonna go pay to see it. And if it's an IMAX, I'm gonna spend more money to do it. Although now we don't have an IMAX, we don't have a real IMAX theater here in the Raleigh Durham area. So I'm more apt to do it to Adobe Cinema or whatever, kind of the premium experience, which is like the equal medium. At any rate, the point is I'm not going to go out there and say like, oh, the story, like the Spider-Man story, or this Marvel story or whatever, like it was missing this, and this is how it played out in the Like I don't do any of that. I just go and watch the movies, and I enjoy them. I do enjoy comic book movies. I do enjoy sci-fi movies and action movies, but there's never a time where I've like read the book. Actually, the Odyssey would probably be one of those cases where I partially read it in high school. But at any rate, like where I read the book before going to see the movie, or I'd seen a bunch of comics and knew the storyline. No, none of that stuff. So just from a pure movie standpoint, like Spider-Man has a formulaic approach to specifically the superhero genre that keeps bringing people in. The only other, um, two characters that are out there that I would say are pretty close to this are Wolverine and Deadpool, and having both those characters in a movie together, um, that was pushed heavily by Ryan Reynolds. Like was the reason why that movie did so well, and why all the Deadpool movies did so well, and why the last standalone Wolverine movie did so well. By the way, if you didn't cry at the end of Wolverine, like you're not a human being. Like at any rate, there's an approach that one could take, and I don't understand why Disney, more specifically, because they are the problem right now. They own all of the major franchises for the most part. Sans like Lord of the Rings, which is owned by Amazon. Um, but I don't understand why Disney can't get it through their head that this is what the audience wants. Now, just imagine if they had not. if they had just stick to the same approach that they took under the phase 1, 2, and 3 of Marvel movies, just in general, um, things would be completely different right now. But instead, what ended up happening was you had a bunch of woke writers that were actually I won't even blame it fully on the writers. I'm going to say that there was woke management that wanted to push an agenda down on an audience and then proceeded to blame the audience as to why the movies were failing and call them a whole bunch of names: racist, misogynist, this, that, and the other. No, it was just because you were creating garbage content. And there was actually one movie in phase 3 that actually there was two, but one movie where this stood out, and which is why this particular character didn't carry on very well in subsequent movies, and it was Captain Marvel. And the reason why, there are two reasons or two things that happened in that movie that turned the audience off of Carol Danvers. It was one where she robs a guy for his clothing. That's not what heroes do. Um, I mean, she essentially beat him up and then robbed him, actually, because she grabs the wrist. He makes some sexist comment and she takes his clothes and his motorcycle. Yeah, no, like that's not what heroes do. And then to top it off, the whole kind of arc of her character was not that she developed into a better person. It was that she was always a great person and always had this great power. And it was the man that was holding her down. So she physically removes the restraint and she becomes the most powerful person ever. Yeah, nobody wants that. That's not a character arc that's inspiring to anybody. Um, but that movie was slid in at a time where they had this massive arc that was going into Endgame and all this other stuff, like kind of the Thanos arc. And so that movie did well because of the success of the other Marvel movies that come out before it. There was one where it was kind of like you could kind of see it happening a little bit, but maybe they were holding back, and it was Thor Ragnarok, which honestly, that movie, while it saved Thor's character, um, the follow-up movie killed Thor's character, and ultimately ended up bombing because it was so bad. But there was Valkyrie, who was in Thor Ragnarok, who was just kind of like, I don't give an ass about anything. Like, and then she was just a powerful female that was just kind of like cast into this movie. And while her character is in the Thor lore, don't get me wrong, it was just kind of an annoying female character. But it wasn't that bad because the overall movie was actually pretty darn good. But then you go into like the phase 4, and it's just pushing female led movies. There's Black Widow, which should have come out in phase 3. She was already dead at this point, so spoiler alert: we already know what happens to Black Widow. We know that she wasn't going to be in any follow up movies. And Black Widow could have been better. The writing was just kind of trash, and the visual effects were just absolutely ridiculous, like so much green screen. But then there was Shang-Chi, who was beat up by his sister. There's Eternals, which was like, it was just gay, and it was a really bad movie. So bad, they basically haven't really talked about it ever since and have no plans on bringing any of those characters back. Doctor Strange, Multiverse of Madness, where he's led around by America Chavez the entire time, and the main villain was Wanda. Thor: Love and Thunder, again, that movie tanked. Black Panther, instead of recasting Chadwick Boseman, since he passed away, unfortunately, instead of recasting Black Panther, they decided to give it to Shuri, his sister. Absolutely not. And then also introduce Ironheart, another character nobody gives an S about. There was the WandaVision TV show, which had her holding an entire town hostage because of feelings. Um, which, by the way, I want to come back to because the main villain in Spider-Man, I think the way that people are talking about it, especially like the people that I follow, are kind of missing the point there. Loki falls in love with himself, the female version of himself. Hawkeye has, again, like he's outstaged by a female. Miss Marvel, again, the show actually wasn't that bad, but it was really pandering to a niche audience of Pakistanis. You had Moon Knight, which is essentially saved by a female. You had She-Hulk, female. Guardians of the Galaxy was actually Guardians of the Galaxy, the holiday special and three were actually pretty good. But the best parts of that movie were the animal cruelty scenes that were just heart wrenching. Um, you have Ant-Man and the Wasp, Quantumania, female basically led, Ant-Man being led around by his daughter and her bad decisions, and ultimately like, um, oh, it's and then there's the Marvels movie that came out, three females, bombed, not great. Deadpool and Wolverine, phenomenal movie. I have my gripes with some of the stuff in there, but overall did a phenomenal job of actually rounding out the 90s and 2000s Marvel characters that didn't get, I would say, good follow ups, especially Wesley Snipes as Blade. Captain America, Brave New World, absolute trash. That movie was so bad. But that was the follow up to Falcon and the Winter Soldier, a TV show, which was absolute trash and then woke like over the top. Um, you had Thunderbolts, which was actually not that bad, but the subplot of the plot of that movie or the underlying theme was like mental illness. It's like it's not really going after men there. Then you have all the DV the all of the other TV shows. Echo, female led. Agatha, female led. Secret Invasion, an overpowered female is leading that and makes Nick Fury look like a complete cuck, essentially. You have Ironheart, female led. Daredevil, Born Again, fairly good. I have my gripes with it. They should have just hired all the writers from the Netflix series and brought all those people in, but they unfortunately could not do that. But Kingpin, played by Vincent D'Onofrio, is essentially led around by his wife and turned into a complete cuck by his wife. The subplot there is he was gone, so she hooked up with another dude, and then he kept the dude alive. He captured him and kept the dude alive, and then ended up killing him later. But I mean, like, whatever. Fantastic Four, female saves the entire movie, and then we have Spider-Man: Brand New Day, which was good. Now, I will say, for Spider-Man: Brand New Day, Jean Grey's character. Now, the females, like the reason why females were bad in the other all of the other previous TV shows and movies, like they had no legitimate reason. Like I especially used the WandaVision example where Vision died because, like, first she had to decide to kill him, then Thanos brings him back only to rip the stone out of his head, which ultimately kills him. It wasn't the government. It wasn't anybody else but Thanos, essentially, and a decision she had to make. So there was no logic to her holding an entire town hostage because she was dealing with the grief of, like, I mean, it's just like it's absurd. It's absolutely absurd. And then she wanted to take kids because ultimately in the Fallout movie, the Multiverse of Madness, she wants to take the kids that she had created from her own powers that ultimately died at the end of WandaVision. She wanted to take them from another Wanda in another universe. Like, none of that makes her a sympathetic character. And you can look at even Ironheart. Ironheart made all the decisions herself. She chose to go work for a bad guy. She chose to make a deal with the devil. Yet somehow she's supposed to be a likable character. Like, no, absolutely not. She's a bad person. Bad things deserve to happen to her. But instead, it's like, whatever, no big deal. Same thing with WandaVision, no big deal at the end of that show, at least. And then in the follow-up movie, she's like killing everybody. Um, but like, none of these females are sympathetic at all. Um, I mean, it's just like maybe Miss Marvel, maybe because she's a teenager, and she's got these bracelets that give her power, and she hasn't really done anything bad necessarily, but Jean Grey in the movie has her sister kidnapped by the government, and ultimately the government murders her sister. So that at least gives a foundation at which she is perceiving and viewing the world as a general threat to her, which is why I don't think she cares about jumping in and out of people to accomplish her means, right? And then at the end, you find out, um, well, there's a particular phrase that's in the movie. It turns out it's the last thing that her sister sees before she dies. That's pretty powerful. And I think that would make anybody want to kill the person that did that to them, which is this entire government agency. But I think that the foundation is there for her to take the approach that she is versus just because government bad, right? Like it would be completely different. But the other thing that I wanted to talk about was like, um, why just in general TV and movies are bad. Well, you have to, I think if we look at the kind of sprawl that's happened between movie studios or production studios that are traditional movie studios and like Fox and Sony and like that kind of world. Um, and then you add in Amazon, Netflix, Apple, and all of these other streaming services that are producing their own content. When we were seeing really good movies, like solid movies made in the 80s, the 90s, and the 2000s, up to 2010s, like like all of that stuff was being developed through a limited number of houses, right? And so there was a lot of gatekeepers. Bad stories and bad writing were generally just kept out for better or for worse. And what you had is pretty good quality. There weren't many movies that were bad like we have now, like the Marvels, for instance. Like, I don't know if that movie would have ever been created. I don't know if shoot, what's another really good one that was just so bad? Oh, the Eternals. Like, I don't know if the Eternals would have been made the way that it was um, earlier on, like if it was made in the early 2000s. Like, I don't know if a bad movie like that would have come out. But what you have now is just like you have so many places producing content, and there's only a handful of writers. So the writers that were writing for these shows back in the day, there are only a handful of really good writers. And so what you had is a really good writing leadership, and then those people were essentially building this infrastructure of other really good writers and being able to tell stories and then push that out. Um, and so now what you have are a lot of places creating content and very few good writers. And the shows when you see them where the writing crews are solid. Andor is a standout show on Disney that probably nobody watches because they were tired of Star Wars TV shows and just everything that happened within that kind of universe. But Rogue One, solid movie, same crew writes Andor, all from start to finish, and Andor is probably one of the most satisfying satisfying like TV shows I've watched in a very long time because it wrapped up all of the characters in the end of the series, and it was so good, and you knew exactly where it was leading off to. And by the way, when I watched the last episode of Andor, I went and watched the first 30 minutes of Rogue One, and things actually made way more sense. It added a whole level of context that wasn't there before because now I had the background in kind of this movement and these characters that weren't there at the beginning of Rogue One. But at any rate, there are good writers that are out there, and those good writers are holding on to their crews and maintaining control over the content that they produce. But most others do not. And so what you have are just this sprawl of really bad writers that are out there, and you're getting this a lot of really bad content, and it's going to continue to happen until one of two things happens: either these movie studios, or the more specifically, I would say Disney. Disney owns so much of the content that we see, just in general. If something happens at Disney to where they start really ratcheting down on bad content, woke messaging being pushed in movies, um, and really poorly developed characters, specifically poorly developed female characters, you can have a female character and a female lead a movie. I mean, we've seen this again. If you go back to great examples, would be Terminator 2 with Sarah Connor, or you have Sigourney Weaver in Alien and Aliens. Like, these are the archetype that you want: someone that's forced into an impossible situation that has to use their wits to get themselves out of it. And it's not going to be because they're super strong or whatever. They can leverage strength to a certain extent, but they have their limitations. Like, these are the female characters that we want to see, not like OP females that just are good at everything and never struggle in life. Like, these characters are trash. And even when male characters are written that way, which doesn't happen that often because most of the roles are going to females now, like, it's also bad. Like, it's just not good. And you got this again, unless Disney starts to crack down on this, which I think they started to figure it out. With paring back of some of these movies, it looks like in the next Black Panther movie, it's going to go back to Black Panther, not Black Panther's sister, Shuri. And so they're kind of figuring it out, but we'll see. We'll see. I think, how the next movie does, which is Doomsday, a lot is riding on the success of that movie. I'm gonna go see it. I'm a big Marvel fan. This particular movie, I'm excited in because they're bringing back so many of the characters that many of us loved and enjoyed in Phase 1 through 3. And I think some of the other characters are going to die. Many of the characters are going to die. And so we'll see which ones are those and see how it sets up kind of the remaining movies. But at any rate, I wanted to cover that. Now on to the third topic, which is Dana Bash's interview with RFK Jr. Now, I've seen the highlights. I didn't sit through like the entire interview, but the back and forth that I saw between Dana Bash and RFK Jr. exemplifies what I think is the biggest issue that Democrats have, which is not acknowledging when they may not have all the facts, or acknowledging that they might have been wrong. COVID is a good example of how the media didn't do their job in just asking the questions, right? Like, it became partisan very quickly because you had lockdowns, which happened, and then it was red states that opened, blue states that stayed closed. And you had the vaccine, which was rolled out, which was held back from release until after the election versus having it before the election. But it was the vaccine and more specifically, the mandates that I don't think Democrats appreciate how bad that is for them. Um, because even in Fauci's diary, he mentions he got a vaccine injury from getting vaccinated. And what I, where I think where I know that the mandates fell off was when they were mandated to everybody. And not only were they recommended, at least from the government standpoint, then they started to, from the federal government perspective, then the federal government said, hey, federal workers need to get this done. Oh, the military has to get this done. And then you started to see pushback within those areas. Then what happened is states decided that, okay, we're going to mandate this, and in order to make sure people are compliant, we're also going to force restrictions on people who choose not to get vaccinated. And so in New York, they had vaccine passports, and they had this in other states as well, where you had to show your proof of vaccination in order to do basically anything that you need to do, whether it was go to a restaurant, whether it was go to a store, you're getting a temperature check to places. Like, it was just over the top. And then from that, businesses also started to do it. And so many corporate businesses forced their employees to get vaccinated in order to come back to the office. Now, where the vaccine story falls off is that at the time that the vaccine, and I'm going to use this term loosely, and actually I'm not going to refer to it as a vaccine, I'm going to refer to it as a therapeutic because that's what it is. At the time that this therapeutic was released, it came through Operation Warp Speed. And the goal of Operation Warp Speed was to get the therapeutic to people that were at most risk, right, or most vulnerable. So these are elderly, these are people with multiple comorbidities, and these could be people with children with a compromised immune system, things like that, right? But it wasn't for pushing on everybody. It was a choice that people could make the same way that they could get their flu vaccine or their flu shot or whatever it might be, right? But what was missing, and this was just the nature of the Operation Warp Speed getting it to market so fast, was any verification that the shot actually worked. While also simultaneously saying that natural immunity no longer mattered. And so the initial pushback from a lot of people was like, wait, there's no studies on this because there's been no time to actually do any of the due diligence that would typically be done for anything that's labeled a vaccine. And then ultimately, then forced on an entire population of people, not just the vulnerable and the people that generally want to get like flu shots and things like that. No, everybody, even the people at lowest risk. And so this is where Democrats lose this particular argument. And this is where Dana Bash misses the entire point. She's trying to brand RFK Jr. as a vaccine effectiveness denier, and that he's anti-vaccine. He is not. He's on the record talking about the measles, mumps, rubella, like those vaccines, and giving them to his kids. His thing is on untested vaccines. And he is looking at if there is a correlation between the current vaccine schedule, which is an insane number of vaccines that are recommended for children, and possible links to autism. Like, that's a worthwhile venture going into. When I was growing up, I think we had like maybe 8 or 9 vaccines, and they were all the major ones. Now the vaccine schedule has ballooned, and the frequency at which you're given those vaccines is something that should raise some eyebrows. So yeah, it's okay to ask some questions about that, but it doesn't mean that you're anti-vaccine. But this one in particular, she falls short on 2 different sections, right? One is RFK Jr.'s contention is that the vaccine wasn't tested and there was no proof that it actually did what it said it did. And you had medical experts going out and saying things like, if you get the vaccine, you will not get COVID and you will not spread COVID. We knew pretty immediately that that was not the case because a bunch of people that were getting the vaccine were getting COVID. And so it became very obvious that that was not the case. Then it changed to, oh, well, the outcomes were less. So then after the vaccine was introduced, you had the number of people that actually died from COVID went up. And so like you got to look at like, okay, did it actually lower adverse outcomes? There is no proof out there that that actually happened. So Dana Bash is arguing that it lowered outcomes. There's no proof that that is actually true. Two, RFK Jr. is arguing that it shouldn't have been mandated for low risk people, and she's saying that it lowered everybody's ability to get COVID. So yes, it made sense as to force it on everybody. They're arguing kind of two different things, but what RFK Jr. is arguing is like the crux of the Democrat position, which was it was okay for us to force an untested medical therapeutic on people because we feared that getting COVID was worse than anything that could possibly happen from getting the shot. And around the same time that you have the shot going out, you have a bunch of people that are getting like a bunch of active to teen boys and grown adults dropping dropping dead for short periods of time from heart failure due to myocarditis. And that was a side effect of the COVID vaccine if it was given directly into the bloodstream versus given directly through muscle tissue. And so it would go to the heart and affect, it would just give you myocarditis. And so like the inability for Democrats to just admit that they were wrong on this one is ultimately the biggest problem. And I talked about this before. This is what I'm most concerned about with Democrats in general, is that none of them will admit that anything that they did over COVID was wrong, or that they could have done differently. And if given the chance, they would do it again. And that is a scary prospect, to know that there's an entire group of people controlling large portions of the country that will force something on you against your will in the drop of a hat. And this is what Democrats have to contend with. Like, again, Fauci's diary gave all of these people an out. It gave them an out. It gave them an out on COVID being not from a wet market and being a U.S. funded U.S. gain of function research, or U.S. funded gain of function research in a Chinese lab in Wuhan that just happened to be not too far from a wet market where it got out and then spread to all those people and ultimately went global. But acknowledging just that it was a man-made virus in a Wuhan lab that was funded by U.S. gain of function research through Peter Daszak and EcoHealth Alliance, like these are the facts that are out there. And it would be very easy to say, oh, we should not do that. And that was a bad idea. And Fauci, like we should definitely admonish Fauci for that. Like they were given an out, and then his diary gets released and basically acknowledges that he knew the entire time. And again, giving them an out. They could have said, oh, wow, Fauci got a vaccine injury. Yeah, like, maybe we should have done that differently. Fauci had no rationale for 6 foot distancing, or 6 foot social distancing, and shutting down the economy, and then shutting down schools and doing all this stuff. Like they had the out, and they will not take it. And the Dana Bash interview is a perfect example of that. It would have been a perfect opportunity for Democrats to just acknowledge, like, oh wow, like this is a highly unpopular position that I have. I can actually just put it all on Fauci and just kind of, brush my hands off and walk away from it and say, yeah, that was bad. We probably shouldn't have done that. Fauci's a bad guy for making those recommendations, but they're not doing that. They're continuing to act like all of the decisions that were made were fine. And, it was fine to take away people's civil liberties and rights in the name of essentially what was a more aggressive cold. Like, they are going to continue to suffer for those decisions. And the mask is off because now you have DSA candidates that are talking about wanting to abolish the Senate and get rid of the Supreme Court and get rid of the presidency. And it's like, what are we like? There was COVID mandates and kind of authoritarianism that happened then, and that was like kind of a lightly dabbling in it. And then you have people that are actually like going out and running on this message. Again, this is why I would never vote for a Democrat unless unless they're for supporting businesses and they're for some of this other stuff. But even then, it's like probably not, because after COVID, I just can't trust any of these people with my own personal well-being, let alone my girlfriends or my kids. Should I have them? Like, it's a scary prospect, an absolute scary prospect. And again, the Dana Bash interview is just like, I don't think Democrats understand how bad it is for Fauci, who had blanket immunity for 11 years, spilling way into the Obama administration. Why him going up there and pleading the fifth was not a good thing. And the only logical reason, there's only two, it's like he could have gone up there and said, yeah, I did all the things that I talked about in my own diary, which was written by my own words, my own hand. And it would have ruined his legacy, and it would have made everybody hate him. And it would have also made people realize like how wrong Democrats were. Instead, he chose to plead the fifth. And by the way, by saying any of that stuff, he couldn't be prosecuted for any of it because he has this blanket immunity. The other option was to go up there and basically say the exact opposite of what has been released through emails, his own words in his own diary, and then get charged with lying to Congress. Instead, he chose to take the fifth. And so you can only draw one conclusion from that. Again, that did make Democrats look good. This Dana Bash interview, as much as there's like this fever dream of like people that believe that RFK is like anti-vaccine and he's a crazy dude, like, no, he's just the person that's kind of interested in answering some of these questions and and looking at the actual research and coming to a conclusion, not forming a conclusion and then backfilling it with all this other garbage like Dana Bash is doing. I mean, again, Democrats are going to struggle on this issue. And the Trust the Science crew is essentially dead at this point. But as always, let me know what you think in the comments section below. What do you think about the new Spider-Man movie? What do you think about the current writing talent that's out there, and why the current, TV and movie industry is in the state that it's in? Let me know in the comments section below. Also, let me know what you think about the Dana Bash interview with RFK Jr. or just the Fauci pleading the fifth, and if you think, he should have just acknowledged some of the things that he wrote. But as always, keep believing that the best is still ahead for America. Peace out.